Hello all. So this is a 15-minute forum all about modelling. Now, modelling is part of our everyday excellence. We know that the most effective teachers provide a lot of modelling with students or for students, and therefore learners are much more comfortable and more successful. We also know that you engage in a lot of modelling with your students, but we just want to kind of go through some strategies on how to extend it that little bit further. So just to be clear, modelling is when a teacher shows their students how to do something so that they can ultimately then do it themselves. That's our definition of modelling. Now, it's worth noting that what the research suggests is actually, when we model, sometimes struggling students can find it really, really overwhelming. It can be like watching a professional dancer do a routine and show you, and it can feel really, really overwhelming. And often they feel overwhelming if we do too many steps all at once. And what we generally find is sometimes students are copying down an exemplar that we're going through, but they're often not actually mentally engaging. They're really too focused on copying the words correctly. I don't know if that mirrors with some of your students. It certainly does with mine, that they're really more focused on copying the words correctly and the neatness of the work that they've produced. So we're just going to go through some of the strategies to help support those struggling students and just model that little bit more successfully where we can. So break it down is one of the key things. So into even smaller steps. So any modelling we do, we want to break it down into really, really, really small steps with student practice after each one of those small steps. So when I think of my students, they have to provide a clear definition. So we chunk it so they just do the definition. After they've done the definition, they then do the theory mark. We practice the theory mark, and it gets rehearsed repeatedly so it can be improved on its own. So they do definition, theory, and go on from there. So really small steps, repeatedly rehearsed in those small steps. Ultimately, we want it so each small step can be improved and practiced on its own. The handover is really critical. So again, for modelling, we've got the teacher shows you how to do it, nice and slow. But what the research is also suggesting is we have to do a lot of we do handovers. So this is where teacher works with the students to do the task together. So you'll see we've got the teacher does it, I do it. Then we do one together. So it's on the board, constantly questioning the students, go, right, where do I go next? Right, show me this item. Right, this is the criteria. What do we need to link this to? So I do one, we do one as a class together. I do one as a teacher, we do one together. And we keep going until eventually, when we're really confident, the student does it on their own. So we do is quite critical to this modelling, where the teacher's doing it with the students with constant questioning. The research is suggesting the we do is absolutely key, because students will get a sense of what it feels like to do the task successfully. And it's getting them towards the moment of independence. So they feel what it's like to do the task successfully. And we're getting towards that independent moment. Students who struggle will need longer in this we do. So they will need more time with that working together with the teacher. Now, often teachers think of this constant we do as spoon feeding, and they're a really bad thing. That what we just stress, and what Tom Sherrington would really stress, is it's not spoon feeding and a bad thing. It's really effective teaching. So we shouldn't fear over helping students. In the end, we can only let them do it independently when we're confident they're completely ready. And even then, when we take the work in and we read it, we make a note of what we need to go back through and reteach with them. There's a really good quote that basically says they're not truly independent learners. They're not completely independent and on their own until they are in the exam hall alone and the door shut. That's when they're truly independent and they're on their own. Or when they're really doing those last little tweaks of assignments, we're still working with them. So spoon feeding isn't a bad thing. It's just really effectively helping teach them so they can work and do it themselves. Tips as well, we have to check for understanding during modelling. It's extremely important. So we show a step as a teacher, we narrate our thinking. So we go, right, the next thing I'm going to do, I know I've got to give them a clear, what have I got to give them? A clear definition. Tell me the definition. And then I go, right, my next step is always when I go to Grover T, I go straight to theory. But we have to cold call students to check they fully understood. And remember that cold calling can just be repeating things back. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to provide them with a definition. So, Reese, what am I going to do? I'm going to provide them with what? A definition. Yeah, lovely. So even if they're just repeating back to us, we just have to keep constantly checking that the students understand what we're doing and where we're going to ensure that modelling is successful. Otherwise, again, we run the risk of them just writing down the exemplar, but not really engaging with the process, just trying to make sure that their handwriting is neat or that they've understood. Yeah, they're not understanding, they're just making sure it's written correctly, which is not what we want. The next one is just a little note, is if you model two similar maths problems with different numbers literally side by side, and the method is revealed more easily than if you just do one and then do a second on later slides. So the research from Tom Sherrington was suggesting that if you literally have two examples side by side on a slide or on the board, it really helps students learn the process and the standards that they're trying to meet. So I thought that was quite a nice tip to pass on. And just lastly, the over to you phase. So again, this is when we've done I do, we do, I do again as the teacher, we do, I do, we do. This is when we give them the over to you, we can give them partially completed examples to finish. And what that means is it again shows them what getting to the end product will look like. And the more practice with examples we give them, we can give them less fully complete examples. So we can give them paragraphs, take less of the completed answers away as they get towards it. Because it's similarly, when we think of modelling, we all learn really effectively through modelling. So we think when children learn to tie their shoelaces, it's how they see it. We go through it, we get them to repeat it. We go, right, what's stage one, what's stage two? It's the same thing. And our learners generally will struggle sometimes with the fluency needed. So those sentence starters that help scaffold it, that we model to them, are really, really helpful. And again, modelling, when we're looking at, for example, a maths problem or a problem, how do we get them to model those stages? So yeah, just some examples of just extending that modelling and what some of the up-to-date research is suggesting we should really be doing. Any questions, as always, do please let me know. Thank you.